All right, so I'll call this board meeting to order. And if everyone would please join me in standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, changes to the agenda.
Oh, do you want me to say something here?
Yep, I think you,
All right.
yes.
I think we ought to change the agenda to allow a discussion of the continuation of the remote learning.
Okay, so we're moving action item number 6, and we're doing that. Are we going to have public comments first, or during, or after that? Where are you wanting to put it?
Before public comments would be fine.
Okay, so let's start there then.
Okay. Well,
Thanks, Charlie.
Thank you. So remote learning. We started remote learning before Thanksgiving this year. The matrix that we use triggered us to have this conversation. We talked about the fact that we went into, as New Hampshire puts it, into the red, or the extreme transmission, or the high transmission across the region, certainly across the state, but Cheshire County was one of the last ones to reach that point. We had that conversation simultaneously. We had some internal COVID cases that resulted in our secondary school anyway needing to go down for a period of time into remote learning due to the number of individuals who would have been asked to quarantine during that time frame. And so we said we would revisit it on today to talk about what's happened. Have things gotten better? Have things gone, gotten progressively worse? How's the area doing? How's the state doing? How's the county doing? What's the best option? And so we look at remote learning, and I say remote learning realities. Some of these I'll just qualify with the fact that there's no hard data, for instance, on this first one. Many learners continue to thrive. I don't have a metric for that apart from just anecdotally. Some parents have indicated that their children are doing well, that teachers indicate that they're having good participation and that their kids are doing well. There are reports of the other as well, that it's difficult, that the remote learning handbook, the second bullet point here, the expectations have increased. And while that is good in one way, it can also be tougher for families because it's a little more planned, perhaps is a good word. Maybe there's a tighter schedule. I guess that the amount of being scheduled is the issue. Internet issues still exist. I personally haven't had many individuals indicate that they had significant internet issues, but we've been able to provide some hotspots to some families. I just got another shipment in for people for hotspots. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. Supervision at home remains a concern. Some parents, even if they're working at home, supervision and doing their job and working with their young children can be difficult. Attendance, we've had good attendance in most cases, but we certainly do have some areas where the attendance has not been as favorable as one would like. So many learners, are missing the socialization, and then there are teachers who have set up actual learning socialization times So for instance, during lunch, there have been lunch Zoom sessions where they just put the Zoom on and kids talking with each other and just enjoy the time as opposed to being apart from one another. So that there have been some good innovations during this time frame. So it is mixed. It is blended. Certainly, my last bullet would say in-person instruction is the goal. I think that's been clear from the beginning. The school board has acknowledged in public that that has been the case as well. But we also need to make certain that we are making the best decisions, not only to make sure that we're getting back in person, but we're getting back there safely for all. So we'll look at the realities of COVID in New Hampshire since the time that we went remote. Also, the realities in New Hampshire schools. We'll talk about Cheshire County. We'll talk about locally. We'll also talk about some regions outside of New Hampshire that are connected to us as well, just to kind of get the data that we need. You can see that since the time that we went remote, the numbers have increased. Actually, if in this particular area, if you were to look at the state dashboard, we have increased threefold. We'll look at that later on. So if we continue. Schools, this is if you were to go onto the schools dashboard, you would see this. Today, that positivity rate of 8.1% is actually at 9%. So all these numbers continue to go into the pattern of increasing. As you can see down there, as of Friday, there were 15 clusters across the state. There was an outbreak in one of the schools as well. And there have been fewer than, I would say 800 cases overall in schools across the state, and there are 90 that are around 100 that are currently going on right now. We can continue. In Cheshire County, this is just a screenshot of these very same charts, and we look at Cheshire County with that new case rate per 100,000 population being at 326.8. That is roughly three times the new case rate per 100,000 in Cheshire County from when we first went remote. And the 7-day positivity rate has increased, and hospitalizations have increased as well. And of course, across the state, you've all read the news that we've had probably this past week as it's increased. We've had days that there have been hundreds, maybe even 1,000 on one of the days that of new cases. If we can continue to the next slide. Other areas that we really haven't talked about because, well, we're in New Hampshire and Massachusetts is a different state, but in watching Massachusetts, certainly if you were to look toward the seacoast of New Hampshire, you would see a lot more red or high volume of COVID. And that also mimics what's happening over in Rockingham County. And most recently, the areas nearest to us that are close to Jaffrey and Rindge, like Winchendon, Gardner, places like that, have started to go into that yellow, and some of, if you in that circle, even though it's not just adjacent to us, not abutting us right there, is red. And so certainly we need to look at those because they come over individuals who live there. We have people who work from there, but we also have individuals who come into our communities to go shopping and so forth. And that's important to look at in a local area. If we can continue. Some other interesting information that has been provided this past week. COVID-19 vaccine. We know that there are several companies that have been working on this. There are a couple companies that are going to be providing the vaccine to New Hampshire as early as Monday. And so the first round, according to the governor, the first round of about 12 to 13,000 of these vaccines will arrive next week, and about 37,000 more. So a total of about 50,000 vaccines that about 50,000 vaccines will be arriving this month. Those vaccines certainly are for the most at-risk individuals. I would not personally be in that category. Teachers are not in the most at-risk category. We are in one of the top tiers of those who would get access to these vaccines. But the next round of vaccines would arrive in about January, February, and then they feel that more mass distribution would be in that March, April timeframe. When school personnel would be able to access those vaccines, that's unclear. Perhaps January and February but again, most importantly, the vaccines, which are about 90+% efficient in this case, or 90% valid, I'm missing the word, but is certainly effective, is good to have our most at-risk people getting that in 2020, December of 2020 and January of 2021, because certainly that takes the risks down in a lot of areas of people getting ill. And if we can switch on to the next slide. So we're here looking at that information, and we have our decision-making matrix. You're aware of that. And we look at Jaffrey and Ringe and those numbers. The positivity rate in Ringe has decreased since the last time that we met, which it was on the higher end. Jaffrey has fluctuated over the last week or so, going up and down. I think they're on the lower end of the positivity over the last couple weeks right now, but it's kind of fluctuated a little bit. I've received emails, several in the last day or two, some from students saying, please, if we go back to in-person, to have a little bit of a time frame, because we have different working schedules that we have now, and give us a little bit of a couple days to transition. I think that, other people would want some transition time as well. That's why I put as decision number 1 as being possible to go back on December 14th. There are other individuals who have not directly emailed me, but through being attached to some emails, have indicated that they are indeed having some difficulty at home with educating or helping educate with the educational process of their children. I think a lot of those have been worked on with the teachers and the parents. I haven't heard anything since a couple of those. I have received other emails from people saying that they were going to send their kids back at the end of this last quarter and no longer want to do that they would continue remote even if we went back. And then I do have some emails from local businesses that keep me updated that would suggest, and people, businesses that employ a fair number of individuals in the local region, that their positivity rates, though they can't give us a lot of information, certainly not about who or where these people live, that their positivity rates, people coming down with COVID, have increased and continue to do so. So as for the rationale why the entire state and the region is going up, and maybe over the past week or so, 2 weeks, our specific region hasn't shown those positivity rates. It could be that people are wearing masks, socially distancing, not having gatherings and so forth. Or it could be that because the school is not going through its normal processes and asking people to get tested as much as it normally has, and we certainly did that quite a bit through the first couple of months of school, that maybe that's not, if people are feeling sick, maybe they aren't going for testing. That has been emailed to me as well, saying that they, people see their neighbors having large gatherings regardless. And it's, that's secondhand, thirdhand information. It's not as accurate as the data that we have that I showed you earlier tonight from New Hampshire and Cheshire County and Massachusetts and the whole state and the schools and so forth. So, I think we have to be careful about taking, some information without having firsthand accounts. The second decision option that I put down here, and I'm sure there's some others, I just put these as kind of the top 5, is what some other schools have chosen to do in the area who are remote. There are most schools in the area are remote currently, and believe that they would remain remote through at least January 4th. Now, January 4th could be a time that they are coming back or a time that they're revisiting the decision. So that's 2 and 3. We could return to our hybrid on January 4th. It doesn't account for any possible holiday travel, judging by what we saw on the news, if that is accurate information. Those airports were pretty jammed and pretty packed during the Thanksgiving season when we said that holiday travel would be at a minimal compared to prior years. And I'm sure it was, but still there were a lot of people traveling and gathering in tight areas. The holiday season in the winter time at the end of December certainly provides more opportunity for travel outside of New England and even in other parts of New England that are increasing faster than even New Hampshire is. So then we have, basically staying the course and saying, well, our next board meeting that would be in January anyway, we can revisit this on the 4th and make a decision then and go from there. The problem with that is that families, and this was early on, I had some communication from 2 particular families saying, we really just need to know rather than keep us hanging. We need to know because people get work schedules every couple of weeks. We have board meetings every couple of weeks, so that becomes problematic for people. So whatever decision we make tonight, I'd rather it be a little more concrete than up in the air. And then number 4, return on the 19th, which of 2020. So it actually should be all these that are say 2020. They should say January 2021. So that's a mistake on my slides. I apologize for that. You should not say 2020. That's already passed. But 19th, 2021. And basically that would certainly extend remote instruction for another month. That's what many people would want, and that's also difficult for other individuals. We understand that. It does take into account holiday travel into consideration. It is a similar time frame that many schools who are currently remote are taking. Certainly the colleges have chosen to come and maybe start even a week later than that due to travel and making sure that they want to get everything situated. And our colleges in the area, Keene State and Franklin Pierce, both actually did an exceptional job. I have to give them credit for the work that they did. They put in some pretty tight regulations, and in order for them to be successful, a college to have such oversight over its 5,000 plus students or 2,000 students, depending what the school is you're talking about, that's commendable, and I have to commend those who are in charge of that. Certainly over at Keene State, Dr. Melinda Treadwell did a good job over there with managing that whole thing, and they feel that it's best to come after that time frame. There are a couple other local schools that have already chosen to come at that after Martin Luther King Day because of that potential travel issue. If you choose a date like that, or if you choose a date like the 4th, or if you choose a date like the December 14th, you're at least giving people concrete return dates rather than constantly being left up in the air. Certainly all of them give time for transition from remote back to in-person. And then, 5, I suppose there's other, just continue to look at the matrix and weigh options and have discussions. I think we've had a lot of discussions of where kind of our values are with this, and we know we want to get back to in-person, but we want to do it safely. My recommendation out of these, if I were going to take everything into consideration and say, getting back in person and doing so safely, to me, while also giving the highest risk people the opportunity to get that vaccine in the next couple of weeks, and then also getting their booster after that, I think that January 19th, 2021 makes a whole lot of sense. It's the day after the Martin Luther King Jr. Day. It gives a concrete time frame. It takes into consideration travel. It gives our area more time to implement the appropriate precautions that we need. And it also gives the opportunity for individuals to start the vaccination process. Maybe not within our exact walls, but again, the people that we're working to protect the most at risk, would be entering that process. Other options, there could be other days as well, and we can discuss that. And that's my presentation for tonight on this.
Okay. Thanks, Ruben, and thanks for laying things out so clearly. All right, discussion. John. John, you're muted.
Yes, I was muted. Sorry about that. Yes, I'd like to say that I think that Ruben's recommendation is the right recommendation. The 19th of January, while it's a couple of weeks, well, it's a month and a half out, but on the other hand, we do have a 2-week break in there. We know that we've had a spike, and this is a way of being cautious enough that we can avoid a crisis that could cause us to lose even more time. I think the idea of having a definite date makes sense. I think we should make it clear, though, that if there is some kind of an emergency situation in Chester County that arises, for example, if the data that Ruben's already presented should change significantly and our rates should increase to a 12% positivity rate, or the number of cases over the prior 14 days were to go from 511 to 1,000 or something, then I think the school board would need to have an emergency review and decide if any change was needed. But barring that, I think the recommendation of the 19th of January makes sense.
Thank you, John. Others? Heidi?
I agree with John. I think it is the safest. I think if we were to go back sooner and continue to see, the numbers rise and we have to keep bouncing back and forth, I don't think that's a good option. I recognize none of this is ideal. We keep saying it. It's a hard position to be in to make these decisions for everyone, but it seems like the safest choice. And I would prefer to err on that side.
Right. Thank you, Heidi.
I just want to clarify that what we're talking about is on the 19th or whatever date we were talking about is to go back to where we were the first quarter of the school year. So those who are, who want to continue with the remote learning that we're on that, side to do that. And then also to have the district's hybrid to return. So not 5 days of in-person for everyone.
Patty?
Trying to unmute. I'm sorry.
There you go.
So I agree. This is a really difficult decision, and I think that the 19th makes some sense because if people are if people are traveling or interacting with others outside their, we'll use the air quotes, pod through the 4th of January or that weekend, and then with a quarantine period of maybe 10 days, that still gets us to the end of that second week. And I'm just not convinced that people aren't going to be interacting with others. And I'd like a better sense of our staff and faculty and their own exposures and how many are currently quarantining. I don't think that I'm not confident that the numbers of positive tests are accurate in our community. I think that there's probably, it's a tip of an iceberg kind of situation, and only the tip of the iceberg is getting tested and the rest are sort of underground. I'm not sure that we have confidence in our community to be clear as to who's truly being exposed and who we would have for staff numbers in terms of attendance. I think we'd have to have some data to know that we would have enough staff on that, whatever the first day is, whether it be next week or in 3 weeks or 4 weeks.
All right. Thanks, Patty. Go ahead, Leisha.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a hard decision to make. I think that Ruben's recommendation of the 19th, though, is the right thing to do, keeping the safety of both our students and staff in mind. I also think it's very important that we do have that concrete date and don't just keep making these decisions every few weeks. I've heard personally from several families who have suggested that it is very difficult that they don't have that concrete sort of expectation, and the general sense is that it's not going to be anytime soon. So them being able to know that would be very supportive for them. So I would support January 19th. As difficult as it is, I think it's the right thing to do in this case.
All right. Thank you, Alicia. Charlie or Laurel? Any comments?
Yeah, our comment is that if you want a concrete date, okay, give me a concrete date that the pandemic is going to end. All right? What I think we need to do is we have a matrix. That matrix was put in place for a specific reason, and that was for the safety of our staff and our students. And reacting to that, changes in the environment, we went to remote learning, and it's worse now than when we went to it. So I think that we should at least give people a concrete date of January 19th and tell them that we're planning on going back in person on the 19th, but don't bet on it because things might change between now and then. So worst, I should say, best case is we're going to be going back on the 19th.
Okay.
Yeah, Charlie, I didn't mean to imply that that would be, I mean, that's the goal, right? But yes, we do need to be fluid and flexible and stick to the matrix that we have before us. So I agree with that clarification.
Yep. And Laurel, I think you were going to comment.
Just to say that I have nothing to add that folks haven't already said.
Okay. All right. Thanks. I probably don't have any more to add either. I think the 19th is maybe not what people had hoped for, but I think it's probably the best choice to keep people safe. And I also think that, you know, our first board meeting in January, is there one before the 19th? There is, isn't there?
What was the question again?
The board meeting before, the first board meeting in January is?
The 4th?
Is that the 4th?
I think it's the 4th.
Yeah.
Okay. I think at the 4th, you know, we probably just need to double check our kind of trajectory at that point and just keep this conversation going. But right now, yes, have a concrete date saying we hope the 19th look at it the 4th, is it still looking like the 19th, or do you think we need to change it? But for now, I say the 19th. All right. So do we want to, we're supposed to have a public comment after this action item. I'm just wondering if we should have 15 minutes of comment, because this is probably a pretty hot topic that people would like to comment on. And then we can make our decision. I mean, okay.
Sounds good. Let's see it.
Okay. So why don't we do public comments for 15 minutes, Nick, or less, and just, it has to be, you know, they raise their hand and state and all that.
Spiel. So yeah, I just wanted to give everybody the, you know, the way to public comment. Ultimately, we've kind of deemed that using the hand raise feature through Zoom is kind of the best way to get people's input. We've been noticing through chat, there's a lot of issues where people are, you know, commenting at certain points of the meeting, or they're not giving us, you know, their names and identifying information. So what we're going to do is, if you'd like to make a comment, just if you want to raise your hand through the participants window, it should be a little thing right on the bottom for most people's screens. You raise your hand, I'll acknowledge you by name, I'll take you off mute, give you the ability to speak. Please just use your first and last name, town of residence, so that we can you know, log all that for the minutes. So we do have a couple hands raised already, and we'll start with Sheila Nagel. Sheila, we're having the same problem that we had last time with you, where you're still using an older version of Zoom. If you want to log on the other way that you did last time, or if you want to try to update that real quick, we can try to get you in, you know, for a public comment. Next, we'll take Laura Rosenthal.
Yeah, hi. I'm Laura Rosenthal. I live in Keene and I teach at Jaffrey Grade School and have been there since 1991. The first question I had, and I wrote it in the chat several times, not sure why it wasn't answered, is how many people are on the call right now? I'm just curious to see how active we are. Can we know how many people are attending tonight?
Happy to answer that if the board's okay with it. That's why we wouldn't be able to. Currently, we have 142 attendees on our Zoom call. That does not include the 9 folks that you see on your screen, which is the 7 school board members,
Excellent.
Ruben and myself.
Great, that's great to hear. And then the other thing I just wanted to say is that I appreciate all of you. I know this is a hard decision, and it feels good to me to be able to know that when and if I do return to school, that it would be after a theoretical quarantine from the holidays for, not for me, I'm gonna stay put, but for all the families that I would be interacting with. So thank you.
Hi there.
Next, we have Mark Haley.
Hi, Mark Haley. I'm from Keene and I teach 8th grade English at the middle school. My question is certainly not one to be answered tonight, but just sort of something thinking forward into the future. And I was just curious if the school or the school district is going to mandate a COVID vaccine or something, you know, something approximating the same sort of level that they do for other vaccines for both staff and students upon return once that vaccine is widely available.
All right, thank you.
And now we have, I think this is, it just says Sheila, but I think it's Sheila Nagel.
Yes, it's me. I was able to log into my phone. I was just wondering, wait, hold on, I gotta turn my volume down. do we have data showing us what has happened since we've gone full-blown remote? Like, is participation going dramatically down with our students? Is it staying the same? Is it getting better? I'm just kind of concerned with students not being in school and us postponing this all the way till the end of January now, that we're going to lose a lot of what our students are doing. So I'm afraid of what's happening with our learners and that they're not getting that in-person interaction with other peers as well as with their teachers, and that they're not getting as good of an education. And with students being at such a low risk, basically no risk of anything serious coming from COVID, I just feel like we might be taking this a little too extreme by keeping them out of school.
Thanks, Sheila.
All right, I'm just going, it takes me a second to go to the next person just because I'm logging and things like that. So next person we're going to have is Aaron. Can we just get first, last name, and town of residence?
Yep. Hi, Erin Chamberlain from Jaffrey. I just have a couple of comments. I mean, so I know the cases are going up. Obviously, I work in the hospital. I see it every day. But even our state, like epidemiologists and doctors, state how school is the safest place for students to be in. We just spent, I don't know how many thousands of dollars for that ventilation system. I feel like we're not using that or utilizing it. The kids are safe in school. January 19th seems like a very long time. I'm very lucky. My child does well remote, but she doesn't like it. I don't think she's getting the best education that she would as if she was in person. And I just hope that we're looking at that too. And the guidelines for quarantining have changed. I mean, they are now down to 10 days, possibly even 7 days if you do a negative test. So we don't have to have a 2-week, 14-day quarantine any longer. That's CDC guidelines. So that's important to kind of look at too. And I don't know if I can respond to Mark Haley, but just because we had a huge update on the COVID vaccine at Monadnock Hospital on Friday, nobody can mandate it. We're not even going to be mandated to absolutely have it because of it has to do with a law about it being released as an emergency vaccine. So just to answer that question, I don't think it will ever be able to mandate it, although it's probably a good idea to strongly recommend it. I don't think we can mandate it. So that was my only question.
Thank you, Erin.
Sure.
All right, next we have Megan Burleson.
Hi. So my name is Megan Burleson. I live in Ringe. I have 5 children in the district, and I am also a teacher at a different district. And I think January 19th is the smart thing to do. I know we talk about kids being safe in school, and that's all good and fine, but staffing in itself is a nightmare. Subs are a nightmare. And I just think it's the smart thing to do to be safe. I understand that quarantine time is now 10 days, but that is, 6 of one, half dozen the other. It doesn't make that much sense. And I will say I have struggling learners at home that struggle remotely, but I also would like them to be safe. And I think that January 19th is fair. And I think as a teacher, some teachers see up to, I personally see 400 kids in a week. So it just doesn't make a lot of sense. So I think you're doing the right thing, hopefully, if that's how this goes. And I just appreciate what you do. Thank you.
Thanks, Megan.
All right, and then Vanessa Mullen.
Yeah, my name is actually Sam Mullen. I'm under my wife's account. My son is Lucas Mullen. I live in Jaffrey. I'm just concerned that we are going over the top. Maybe there's a lot of hesitation with the teachers wanting to come back to work because of the supposed risk, but the risk is low for children. It's been proven time and time again, even stated by some higher officials, even as so far as the president. I don't agree with the risk, and I don't feel like my son is getting the education he needs. And I'd like to see a little bit more consideration for some of the kids that want to come back to school but are being forced not to. Maybe find somebody that's willing to come to school and teach my kid would be a really nice option. Whether it be smaller groups, better risk. I know that one other parent was talking about higher ventilation. There are risks. People do it in ERs every day. I'm personally a truck driver. I take that risk every single day going to work. I just like to see more done and not so much sitting at home. And I just feel like it's not getting handled.
All right. Thank you, Sam.
All right, and now we have Carrie Swift.
Hi, Carrie Swift from Jaffrey. I'm a parent and a teacher of students in the district. I just want to say I really appreciate all the thoughtfulness of the board in this decision. I 100% agree with you, and I just wanted to say that and let you all know that I really do appreciate you and the decision. I can't say enough about the thoughtfulness of you guys, so thank you.
Thank you, Carrie.
All right, that's the last person we have a hand for right now.
That was it?
That's all I have.
Okay. Well, we only had 2 minutes left anyway, so it's pretty good. Okay. So we need a decision. We need an action. Is there more discussion before?
I'll make a motion that we take Ruben's recommendation and choose option 4 and plan on going back in person on January 19th.
Okay. Thank you, Charlie. Laurel, did you just second that?
I did.
Okay. Thank you. And John, I saw you had your hand up. You're muted.
No, I have nothing to add right at the moment. Thank you.
Okay. All right. All right. So we have a motion and a second to accept Ruben's just option 4. So if there's no further discussion, I'll do a roll call vote. Patty?
Aye.
Thank you, Patty. Alicia?
Yes.
Thank you, Alicia. Heidi?
Yes.
Thank you, Heidi. John?
Aye.
Thank you, John. Laurel?
Yes.
Thank you, Laurel. Charlie?
Yes.
Thank you, Charlie. And I say yes too. So that carries 7-0-0. All right. On to the superintendent's report.
All right, so I'll just briefly highlight a few items because you're going to be hearing from me later on tonight too. Had a really exciting meeting this afternoon with some teachers in the elementary school, the administrators, and also some faculty from Franklin Pierce. And it's exciting, not because necessarily we've made any decisions or anything. It's certainly premature for that, and we have to involve all of our staff in a conversation. But over the last year or so, I've been in conversation with the university and looking to see if we can develop a partnership that would highlight the great things that are going on in the Jaffrey Grade School and the Ridge Memorial School, and also just be better community partners with one another, to have a 50-50 win-win relationship. And so we're in the midst of just having some conversations around the potential of having RMS and JGS like lab schools, or if in the medical profession, if you were to go, for instance, to Lebanon up to Dartmouth, they'd be a teaching hospital. So where you'd have various levels of college students coming in and being in the classroom, working with kids in small groups, but doing so over a period of time, not just a year or a semester or 8 weeks, but really over these individuals would learn our community and learn our district in the period of about 3 years. And so we're just having some really neat conversations. And just it's neat to have those conversations with them and to continue that continue our efforts of trying to partner. So safety training, this past Saturday, we had a couple of items or a couple of events that took place here at the middle school, high school. On the high school side of things, we had several teachers and some administrators and associates and coaches get CPR first aid certified. Looks like I may have a spelling error in there. First aid certified. And then on the other side of things, the community with the Jaffrey Fire, the police. If we could scroll down a little bit, other individuals could be able to read that. Basically, that Chief Chamberlain from the Jaffrey Fire Department received a grant, which included tactical bulletproof vests for his staff, as well as the required training. It was training for our local individuals in law enforcement and the fire station to practice supporting or rescuing injured people while the scene would still be active, like an active shooter scenario. And so we were glad to be able to have that opportunity, and for our community to have that opportunity. Our Lou Chattel, who's our district safety coordinator, indicates, you can see it all in italics. This is his statement to me. But at the very end, as with any training of this type, we discovered some improvement opportunities and to further discuss. And that's why we practice. And I'm really excited that this is a good step forward into perhaps getting more community and school joint practicing for emergency scenarios. So if we continue down. Accreditation. So I put JRMS CHS accreditation. JRMS currently is not accredited by NEASC, which is the New England Association of Schools and Colleges. Our high school is. Certainly, we could have the middle school and the high school go through an accreditation process. A lot of schools who are in our scenario where the building is the same do that. I went on a NEASC accreditation site visit in Vermont a couple years ago where that scenario took place, and they actually accredited the entire school, which is neat. The NEASC standards came out this year. They have revised ones. So in 2020, the NEASC standards have changed actually quite a bit from what they used to be. And so if you want to Google NEASC and their 2020 standards, we'll talk more about them as the month and the months through this year and even in the years to come. The standards actually mimic or are very closely aligned with our strategic design. So a document that we developed over 3 years ago now, actually 3 years ago now, almost to the date, has found itself largely in the NEASC standards. I'll give you an example. So NEASC would ask that the schools, if they're going to be accrediting, move toward different grading practices where they separate work habits from the learning that goes on academically. You know, there's a focus on social emotional learning. There's a focus on different aspects of safety and so forth. So there are a lot of things that our district has already started to do that is very much in line with these standards. And so I'm excited that we've been going down the right path. I think that's going to become more evident as we make more concrete 5-year plan in the next several months for moving forward and achieving not only the accreditation standards, but our vision that we've created for the school. And so I'm excited about the work that's going forward. School funding. This is an email that you may have received as a school board. I'm not sure that the community, the public gets these emails. The New Hampshire School Board Association reported that there was a commission to study some school funding options, and they reported to the governor last week. And with that study, it's like 180 pages. And if you Google it, I believe that you can actually find the entire 180-page report. There is a seminar for people, if they, I think school board members anyway, on the 9th. So that's in a couple of days. You'd have to register. It's like 8:15 to 9:30. So it's about an hour, 15 minutes, hour and a half around there. And basically it's the commission going through this report and giving more details. It's a report. It gives information. It doesn't set anything into motion necessarily, but we have been talking about school funding for a long time in New Hampshire. And the 4 topic areas, you can see them right here. Number 1, the current funding formula is inequitable. So they found that to be the case. Targeting aid to vulnerable communities can help advance educational equity. So that's a conversation. Shift to an outcomes-based model that directs funding to communities with most in need. So shifting basically is putting the funding sources to, toward different communities. And they are not proposing any new taxes. But you can see that there are some tax considerations that they would suggest we consider anyway. So just that conversation's been going on for a long time. Last couple of years, you heard some of the the gubernatorial candidates coming around the state of New Hampshire and talking about school funding. Certainly there have been lawsuits in the state of New Hampshire that go back a ways about school funding and adequate education and what constitutes an adequate education. So more conversation to come.
Any questions for Ruben? Sorry, I thought I saw someone's hand go up, but I guess not. Okay, well, thank you very much. All right, so on to the consent agenda.
Could we please pull the stipends from the consent agenda?
Okay. Any other changes to the consent agenda? All right. So we've pulled the stipend. Can I get a motion?
I move we approve the consent agenda as amended.
All right. Thank you, Laurel.
Second.
Thank you, John. Roll call vote. Patty? I think you're muted, Patty.
Aye.
Thank you. Charlie?
Aye.
Thank you. Heidi?
Aye.
Thank you. Alicia?
Yes.
Thank you. Laurel?
Yes.
Thank you, John.
Yes.
And I say yes as well. The consent agenda as amended passes 7-0-0. All right, now the stipend list.
So I recuse myself from this.
Yep, thank you. Need a motion?
I'd like to move that we approve the stipends list.
Okay, thank you, John. Second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Heidi. And roll call vote. Patty?
Aye.
Thank you, Charlie.
Aye.
Thank you. Heidi?
Aye.
Thank you, John.
Aye.
Thank you, Alicia.
Yes.
All right, and I say yes. And Laurel has recused herself, so it passes 601.
600.
600, sorry, recused, not abstained. Sorry, thank you. Okay, moving on. We have a budget overview.
Okay. So, briefly, the administration, and I use that term broadly, with facilities and technology, each of the schools, certainly here in the business office and the SAU, spent some time over the last month or so making certain that we would put together a budget that reflected what we believed the district needed. We believe that we've done that, and I'm presenting that with some adjustments from the draft one numbers that we had put out. I'll explain that through this presentation, and I think that you'll see the logic of some of these changes. And I'll try to explain the math as well so that it's clear as to the decisions that we are at least proposing. So the table of contents, you can see, we'll talk about enrollment first, because enrollment's actually a significant piece of this budgeting and a significant item to watch for future budgeting. How this next year pans out with an enrollment of what the actual enrollment will be is going to make a difference in how we budget going forward in the future. Maybe, and if we were to make changes, how we budget this year, but certainly I would say that's an important item to watch. Staffing, just some conversations around staffing and some adjustments. Some of that has to do with enrollment. And certainly as enrollment, if it were to decrease and continue to do so, or and if all the individuals who did not choose to come to the school district this year for a variety of reasons, mostly due to masks, at least that's what I'm informed. You know, if those individuals choose not to return, that's going to certainly we'll have to have staffing conversations at all levels. That doesn't mean just school staffing changes. It could mean SAU staffing changes, administration staffing changes, support staff and so forth. Usually it doesn't affect support staff quite as much because therefore, if you have square footage in a building, you need the same number of custodians, for instance, to clean that area, and maintenance staff and so forth. We'll look at some programmatic changes that drive this specific budget, all the way from preschool through 12th grade and graduation. And then we'll look at the default budget, the draft proposed one, and then some recommended changes. So every year we have an outside organization do our projections. As you can see this year, and these are just accurate numbers, information that we actually provided the organization, was that this year we had a decrease across the district of 142 learners. That largely, about 100 or so more, came from, maybe 120 came from the Ringe Memorial School and the Ringe community. So that is going to be an important piece of data as we go into the rest of the budget conversation in just a little while. If we go to the next slide, this is now taking that information, and NESDEC the company that we've been using out of New England, is now taking that number and saying, here's what the projections are. Now, if you look at 2030, that 1229 number, that's still 100 to 150 individuals less than what we had even last year and the years before. So between kind of in that range. And so that assumes that that number of 193 this year is not going to increase significantly next year. That is not how we budgeted for the upcoming year. We did do a little bit of surveying, though our return was not fantastic. It was consistent from school to school in that we estimate 50% of the learners that are currently not coming to the school would return. So also keeping that in mind. So out of 140 individuals who are not here, we're saying that about 70 to 75 are going to return next year. So for staffing, we have a couple different areas of staffing to consider in this budget. Basically, we're saying that we want to keep staffing levels similar, with the exception of some support staff in different areas. Either increasing the role of an administrative assistant over in the SAU to continue to help us improve our facilities work that we are undertaking, and we've been making a lot of good headway, and the individuals who have been working in that capacity have done a great job, and we want to keep on doing that. In addition, a position that we used to have, we took away because of Medicaid issues within the state. Those issues have been more or less resolved, and we want to institute a 0.5 FTE student services secretary for the purpose of Medicaid reimbursement. And you can see the other ones right there. One that I'm sure we haven't had a lot of conversation about, 0.125 stenographer. I'm not saying that we would want to hire a 0.125 employee. I suppose that would be possible, but basically that represents about $4,000 or $5,000 to as a suggestion to pay for someone to take minutes at all these board meetings, so that it would free up the communications coordinator, board secretary, actually many hours during the week, because as he does multiple jobs all at one time, some of it's not as efficient as it could be due to having to do all those items all at one time, of running this meeting, running the Zoom, all of that sort of thing. And so we think that this would make for more efficiency and improvement in other areas that the school district would benefit from. Over at CHS JRMS, we'd want to eliminate the concept of the individual who oversees like study hall, but put that into a media associate to make sure that, to increase that position, that role, so that we have someone else other than the library media specialist in there on a regular basis for supervision. The intent, of course, is to improve that area and to increase the usage of that area, and not just the usage, the number of individuals who use that area, but also the quality of how the services are offered to learners and to adults in the school setting. Those total, increases, I guess you could say, would be about 96,000. Now the Medicaid secretary alone, we estimate, and this is a low estimate, but I think, it's a conservative, it's not a low estimate, it's a conservative estimate, that we would be bringing in about $150,000 of additional revenue. So we feel good about the decision. We think it's worth putting those positions in place, that position in place in particular. If we go down to the next one, you can see other shifts. This is not a total FTE shift, but there's some programmatic shifts. It does, however, if we look at the elementary schools. Ringe Memorial School, if we were to budget for 50% of its learners coming back next year, it would be a decrease of about 2 classrooms, 40 to 50 students. And so in doing so, and in doing so with our practice, when we have reductions like that, we reduce staff in kind. So we would reduce 2 classroom teachers by the number of classrooms, groups of students that would no longer be attending the school. Certainly, there's a possibility all of them come back. There's also a possibility that NESDEC's correct and we're going to have like 4 or 5 kids come back. So we're going right into that middle zone there and basing it on the data that we have for what people have told us. We are suggesting, because we have an increase or a bubble group, I guess you would say, a class that's larger than is typical at the Jaffrey Grade School, going through the school, that we take one of those teachers and move that over into the Jaffrey Grade School to continue the teaching over there. And we don't plan on having decreases in students at Jaffrey Grade School. But also, and what we'll talk about in just a minute, is the theme of improving our learners' capacity around technology and using technology to learn, to further their learning, to think, and to solve problems. So one of those roles we would ask that we would bring a full-time technology teacher over to the Ringe Memorial School, which would allow JGS to also have a full-time technology teacher. Right now we do have 1 full-time technology teacher in the elementary, and it is shared between the 2 schools. I will say having 1 person do that and work with about 700 learners on a regular basis, week by week, day by day, moving around to both locations, can be quite a hefty task. We've had it performed, but we would like to take it up a notch. And the reason for that is because we'd like to look across this district, and this is, we believe, outlined not perhaps explicitly, but it's woven through the strategic design, is making certain that we're taking our learners in our district and causing them to be literate for their future in the area of in a lot of areas, not just technology, but we'll focus on technology right now. Literate in technology, so that as they go into the middle school and the high school, that they go from being literate in technology or using technology, kind of learning how to do all that, to the opposite of that, which is using technology to learn and to further their learning. And so when we hit that secondary area of this slide, we see that we would, on those bottom 3 there, change the way we utilize our staffing or our expectations around technology education at the middle school and high school, and move it more toward STEM. Perhaps down the road, as teaming evolves, maybe more towards STEAM. So adding the arts in that as well, design. So STEM, for those who don't understand what that acronym is, it's science, technology, engineering, mathematics. There's a lot of literature about the impacts of STEM on students and student learning and their exposure to a wide array of jobs, whether it's college bound or not college bound, that are out there that are STEM related, that our students can get high paying quality jobs if they have the skills and the thinking skills that they need. And it takes years to develop that, and we believe we need to start that. And so it's a district-wide effort to, once again, teach kids so that they have their basic skills and they know them well, and they come into the middle school and high school having those. So we're not continuously reteaching the same thing, but we're taking that understanding that foundation that they have in elementary school and building upon it so that they create, they innovate, and they expand their learning. This also, within that area, it's is parallel, or it intersects with the shift that we decided last year from moving from construction trades to building trades. So from carpentry, basically is a couple years of carpentry with the ATC program, to a program that focuses more on providing broad exposure to the areas of building trades like plumbing, electrical work, yes, carpentry, masonry, a variety of other, about, maybe 6 to 8 different types of areas that we'd want to get our students involved with. And that will require us to have more individuals who have a broader skill set so that we can utilize them together to develop the curriculum and instruction program that we want for that program. The area right in the middle of what I've talked about, the CHS special educator and the 6th grade ELA teacher, basically we have a position that we've had where we've had a special educator in the high school area. That individual and that individual's role has been to support a portion of the population, a certain number of kids, perhaps provide guidance to them. Yes, some instruction and some case management. We have the capacity to do all of that, but we have the need for that guidance and that support to be expanded to all learners, not just a select few. For roughly the same amount of money, certainly with that special educator line and another area in guidance that we have the funds budgeted that would enable us to go forward with hiring a director of guidance. This position has been something that many in the community have asked for. It's been talked about since I've come here that, oh, we need to have a director of guidance. But what we've done over the years is we found those areas in guidance that we have wanted to strengthen, and we've taken those and dealt with those. An example of that is 504 coordination. That's a legal item, and that we are doing very well right now within the secondary school. We have a 504 coordinator, works really and does a fantastic job. We took that out of guidance so that they could focus on other areas of future planning with students. We have a social worker who is also acting as the guidance counselor of 6th grade, and we have some other social emotional programs. The director of guidance position allows for a lot of those other positions to accomplish more than what they're currently doing, but also provides and what I believe and is an extraordinarily needed addition and focus, I guess you could say, a person to help us focus on improving and strengthening overall guidance and support for our learners, to help them focus on their personal learning, to help them be able to plan for their collegiate future, and to help them plan if they are choosing to not go the route of college. I believe that we have a lot of growth in both of those areas, and this is a significant need to make sure that takes the next step and continues to improve in the years to come. This is a good time to implement this as we look at future planning. It's a good time to implement this as we start to talk more in depth at the next education committee, which we will also put on Zoom. We have not done that as of yet. We've just really getting into the groove of some of these committees that we've implemented. The education committee on the 14th will talk about some of these areas of the building trades curriculum, of guidance, of future planning with students, of personalized learning. And so the main presenter for the education committee on the 14th will be the administration of the middle school, high school, but we'll also have some teachers as well helping to present that. And I encourage people to come to that, learn more, And we'll put out some communication about that so others can be involved in listening to some of the planning that is going on. If we go to the next slide, we get into the numbers of the budget. So those previous slides outline kind of the philosophical shifts. I think school improvement shifts. For the most part, they're not major increases, if any. Certainly those teachers, those turn out to be offsetting with one another. The default budget is not defined by the difference between the approved budget of last year and the number that it turns out to be, you know, through legal rationale this year. If you were to look, it's really the default budget compares itself to the adopted budget. For those listening, the difference between the approved budget and the adopted budget is the approved budget is the budget that you first vote on. It's the budget we actually are talking about, you know, which and I'm focusing on the general fund, where it hits the tax rates. The adopted budget is the approved budget plus items like any CBA articles that passed. So for instance, last year we had a JRSSA negotiation. We put it on article, I don't know, it could have been Article 5, let's say, and the voters voted that in. So that would be added into the adopted budget. But to kind of compare the draft one budget with the default budget, I kind of compared them to the same, which is the approved budget of last year. So the default budget, for a variety of reasons, is significantly higher, I would say, you know, than the approved budget from last year. We'll take a look at some of those drivers in just a minute. If we go to the next slide, the first draft of the administration's budget was about $340,000 higher than the default budget, including the items that you just saw. One thing that would be in this budget that would not be in the default budget is that in the approved budget, we don't have the first year of the JRSSA agreement. So in this budget going forward, we have to account for 2 years of that agreement, last year, as well as the additions to salaries that come out of that for this year. If we go down to the next one, we see where a lot of these major drivers are. And most of these, except for the $86,406 JRSSA contract year 2, I mean, that's embedded, that's important in the default budget. There's also another 86 or 85,000 that would be a driver in the draft budget because we have to account for 2 years of that. But these are the major drivers. Basically, there's a third year of the JREA contract to consider. The JRSSA contract, year 2 of that. Retiree buybacks, we had people retire in their contract. There's some contractual obligations that we have with many of these individuals. And so you can see that amount. New Hampshire retirement was a huge increase. It increased a couple percent, a little bit more than that. This is something that's going to be hitting the communities for the towns as well. I believe police and fire are included in the increases in New Hampshire retirement. What that means for our district right here is over $400,000. It's an over $400,000 increase that the district has to pay. Health insurance, actually that number is not a bad number. Our health insurance increases this year about 2.5%. That's very good. The average, I think I was told, for healthcare was like 5, maybe 7%, between 5 and 7%. And of course, there are those who are on the higher end of that. And we were on, I think, the lower end of that. And then some increases that we put in for salaries and benefits in SAU and the JRAO. So it's a combination of SAU exempt, SAU non-exempt, so individuals who are hourly employees who don't have necessarily a contract, but more of a agreement. And then the JREO, who has their agreement or as well. Those are budgeted at 2.5% for SAU and JRAO, sorry, SAU exempt in JRAO, and then 3% at those non-exempt employees. What ends up happening is non-exempt employees tend to be hourly. Sometimes the salaries are lower than some of the exempt. That's not always the case. But we figured that that category, we would budget more for increases. Both of those numbers are lower than the increases that are found in the contracts, the other contracts that mentioned, but we wanted to, stay at least similar. And you can see the number there that all adds up to. If we go to the next slide. Once we get the draft budget, which all of the individuals go through and put in their request for the school, we meet, the business administrator and I go through a couple rounds with each individual. We ask them to go back and make some cuts here and there. We did find some items in our facilities budget that we felt we could cut right away. The facilities manager hadn't gone through our process before, did a great job, but wanted to make sure that we had money for every item that we were actually trying to do. Now, in fact, some of these items that we are trying to get accomplished, such as some work over at JGS relative to their parking lot, we are already scheduled to do this year. So whether it be out of this year's budget, or whether out of the building maintenance reserve trust, or whether it be out of if it's parking, a parking allotment that we have, that would still be all scheduled to be done this year, but not out of next year's budget. So we were able to take those items out of the draft one budget, and that was in the tune of 111,000. The exact number actually, as I look back at my notes today, was 111,777. So we can go to the next slide. Now, for the past several years, the Jaffrey Ringe Cooperative School District, we work hard to carefully manage the budget, and we've been able to end each year, the last 5 years anyway, with a sizable surplus. There's two areas that the bulk of that surplus come from every single year. One of those areas is student services. Some refer to special education. It's a little bit broader than special education. And the other area is just general fund salaries. So this is just a snapshot of a 3-year average. The fourth data point to your right shows what we budgeted this year in the blue line, and the spending that's more of a projection, that it's based upon already items that are encumbered and have been spent. It does kind of go in line, however, with the prior year spending, at least the trajectory of that. It could be a little bit higher. It probably won't be lower. The last 3 years, really, I have to commend the Director of Student Services for managing the budget area very well. I know that she wants to make certain in this area where it's a huge part of the budget. It's like a $7 million plus part of the budget. So if you think about it, almost a little over a quarter of the budget. She has a lot of moving parts, and so she's done an impeccable job. But we've been able to have about a $420,000 surplus on average. Sometimes it's been more. If I gave you another data point in 2016-17, you would see that there was an $800,000 surplus there. There were some abnormalities that year, and we can say that there are abnormalities last year, and we can say that there are abnormalities this year. There's always something that's going to come into play, but our spending practices tend to be consistent throughout. So that's been a consistent average overage or surplus, sorry. So if we go to the next one, we see that if we look at a similar slide, but look, you can see to the right, those numbers are a lot larger in the area of 17 and 18, 19 million. That's all salaries, which we know the majority of the budget is made up of. 75% of the budget is salaries. Sometimes that fluctuates between 75 and 80%. The difference, the average difference over 3 to 4 years has been about 480,000. Now, if you go back to a few years before that, it was maybe a little bit less than that. It could be 460,000. If you included what we might, or what we're projecting for this coming year, you'd increase that. So we're trying to find a fair average. And so about 488,000 we've had. These are areas, these two areas that we've consistently had for surplus. We can budget in a different way. We can budget through these trends. It's not how a lot of districts do it, but it's how we've started to do it in order to keep our budgets in a more manageable format, where we are at consistently or a little bit below sometimes the state average of spending, where you kind of want to be. It's a good area to be. I think Messinic is the other area. They're a little bit lower than we are, and there's a couple of places that are a little bit higher. And then there's a lot of places that are a lot higher with their per pupil spending. So we look at these two areas and we say, there's some area that we can make cuts to this draft one budget. So we take the next slide and we say, all right, every year we've had this surplus. I mean, we talk about surpluses of being, $1 million. Sometimes a little bit more. And we've, that's, hey, better to be on that side than the other side, but it's nonetheless, it provides us with some trend information that says we can be, we can make some good, strong assertions that this next year is going to follow suit very similarly. The mathematic trajectory, it's not really lying to us. It's been consistent year after year after year for a long time. So we look at the areas of surplus like student services and the salaries. And there are areas of overlap with all that, right? So that middle area, you can't just take your 488,000 and say, all right, I'm going to cut 200,000 from that, let's say, or 300,000 from that, or maybe 400,000 from that, and then do the same thing to the other area, because some of the surplus in student services is some of the same surplus out of the salaries and benefits. And there are other areas that are in surplus as well. So if we take a look at, I'll try to explain that through the next slide. If we look at the average surplus for student services, which is that lower number, the blue and the green, that adds up to the 422. And then if we look at the yellow and the green, that adds up to 488. These are hundreds of thousands. And the average over these several years, the average shared area, so that's basically the student services staffing, that shared area of surplus is about $200,000. So we don't want to take that $200,000 of that specific line anyway out twice and say that it's in two different locations where it's really all one number. So we go to the next slide. And so what I'm proposing here anyway, after consultation with the Finance Committee, I think the Finance Committee would like to see this number go lower. They did not put a mandate, this is the number we want. I don't think they felt that that was their role, because it's the board's role that way, but they certainly encourage fiscal responsibility. And I think that these cuts right here show fiscal responsibility. I think they show the 111 that I talked about is really 111.77. And then in taking that number 2, student services, we've not come within 100,000 of, or even 150,000 of that 7 million. ever. We've consistently budgeted over the last couple of years over 7 million. We were going to budget 7,300,000 this year, and because we always look at what we think are actuals and then take it from there. We believe that we can reduce that to a budget of 7 million and still be in good order for our student services. Now, it takes tighter management of that, and it's I'm not saying it's easy to manage that with the type of accounts we have in a school district, but overall I believe we'll be in fine shape to not go over that amount. We of course do have an account in case that we have unexpected costs. Again, we've never gone over that amount. We've never come in within 100 to 150,000 of that amount. We don't know what this year is going to leave us with. So, you know, I don't think we'll come in with 100,000 of that amount, but we still have a little bit of a buffer. And then we have number 3, the salaries and benefits overall, because there's some, they share some of those numbers. We looked at it and thought that pulling a straight 125,000 out of that area would be a safe number. So a total of about 430,000 coming out of the student services and salary and benefits, which is a fair amount of money, and then another 111,000 out of the facilities area. So with that, we go to the next slide. What I'm proposing that we do is we have the default. That number goes on the warrant, and there are items in there that have to be in there. We want to give our taxpayers a choice. We want to provide a budget that is as fiscally responsible as I think we possibly can, understanding that taxes, do play a major part in the lives of all of our the community, certainly, but our families. And we also know that in Ringe in particular, I can say from our earlier slides that when you pull, if you have, let's put it this way, if you have 100 learners fewer than you have in the past, that impacts adequacy aid coming back to that community. And so I can't fix that, but we can do our best to make certain that we take into consideration that students fewer students are in that school, which is why we reduce the classroom teaching roles at that school. So the other possibilities, if we wanted to reduce further, we could look at our current budget and look at like what we've done in the past. We have reduced the technology lines by, say, if we want copiers, getting our copiers, if we needed our copiers in 4 months, we could use our copiers now. Those sorts of things we look at. Technology in the area of computers we've cut in the past. It's why, actually, because we pre-bought some items last year, we had a lower technology budget. It's why the technology budget seems a little higher this year. It's really not a heck of a lot higher than normally budgeted. There's a little bit of an increase, but the big gap there is because we've done that purchasing with prior surplus funds, because, well, every year we've had a good sized surplus and we've been able to do it. And it's smart to do. So that's an area that could be considered if we wanted to look at reducing this, if this number was not where this board thinks is acceptable. For more specifics around, any type of, I'd be happy to answer any questions I possibly can. I do have other administrators at our school board meeting tonight who could answer questions as well.
Thank you, Ruben. So what questions do we have on the budget at this point.
Ruben, could you please return to your salary slide,
Yeah.
the graph?
Yep.
Okay. First, I want to thank Ruben for preparing the presentation, and because I think it sets us up well for Saturday. I will say that in the Finance Committee, we did talk about a number, and it was $1 million. When I look at the salary slide, budget trend, it's not sustainable given the number of students that we service in our community. I know that the actual, the right-hand point on the red line looks like our actual is going down, but I suspect that at the end of the year, it will be parallel to the blue budget line, because that right-hand data point is only encumbrances, right, Ruben?
That is correct.
Okay. In the presentation regarding the shifting of staff, you explained how RMS will lose 2 classroom teachers because of decreased enrollment. And you said that Jaffrey Grade School enrollment is remaining the same. Yet we're proposing to shift a classroom teacher from RMS to JGS. We're going to have to look at our staffing. And I would say we should do it sooner rather than later. I would ask the board to look at the student to adult ratios in our district, the student to teacher ratios in our district, and the classroom sizes in our district. All that information has been provided to us. And I think that we should be ready to talk about it on Saturday.
Thanks. Thank you, Laurel. How about other board members? Any comments at this point?
I'd like to hold mine until Saturday, Marcy.
Okay. Thanks, Charlie. John, you had your hand up?
Yeah, yes, I'd just like to say thank you, Ruben, for going through the philosophy, explaining a little bit about the default budget and about some of the impacts that we've seen. And yeah, this is an important time of year for us to think about the recommendations for our the educational philosophy we're going to follow, taking into account the health, including the fiscal health of our communities. So Laurel makes some good points. Obviously, these are things we have to struggle with. So appreciate the information tonight, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot to think about between now and Saturday and on Saturday. So thank you.
Thanks, John. All right. Patty?
I would just say that I think if we can take I think this is really good. It's a great place to start. It's very thorough. Are there any lessons we've learned from this year that we may need to continue to look at? Any roles or any, whether it's nursing, whether it's anything that we need to build in to help us through another season of this, should it come back around, or should us not get enough vaccines. I don't know, but I think to ignore the fact that pandemics exist would be silly for us in terms of this budget. I also think there's probably some outcomes of some metrics that we need to look at in terms of are we putting enough emphasis in salaries in the areas we want to see improvement and growth. So if I don't see any of that, I mean, I see shifts and changes, and I think guidance is a terrific area to add I consider that a direct support to students, Laurel, and not, not a warm body. I think that's someone, it may not be a teacher, but they certainly are in an advisory role. And
Absolutely.
I think we need to, it's not just about adults to kid ratios. I think it's what those adults do to support the kids. So those are my thoughts, but I'll look forward to Saturday for sure.
Thanks, Patty. Okay, any other for tonight or?
One question.
Yeah.
Ruben, would we be able to see where we are this year, the financials to date?
Well, as in right now or on Saturday?
On Saturday, no, not right now.
Oh, okay, yeah, I'll ask Carrie. I'll ask Carrie. We'll talk to, I meet with the administration tomorrow on a variety of these items, and so we'll talk about what we need to get ready for Saturday, so we can do that.
Thank you.
Great. Heidi, yeah.
Ruben, on slide 6, where it talks about the program changes under secondary, where the 3 teachers changed to the world language and the 2 STEM teachers, where does the construction trades position fit in this? Because it looks like that building trades teacher.
Sure. Actually, because I was spending so much time on this slide, I actually skipped over a couple of the items that I had wanted to talk about here. So I'll talk about that first, and then go up to the reading portion of this as well, and the world language, which of course I skipped over. They all have, it's all for the very same reason, actually, why we would be doing it. So basically the concept is, and we have a STEM teacher already, but the concept is to have multiple people who are in that capacity who could help to, one, offer more variety within our school for all of our learners in the area of STEM, but then also be able to, for instance, let's say we have, let's just say we have 6 modules within a school year. So 2 of them have to do with carpentry, 2 of them have to do with electricity, and maybe an offsetting that is plumbing. And then 2 others are masonry and some other aspect of the building process. One person being able to kind of take all of that, that's quite a significant role. And so spreading out those modules to different people, we think makes a whole lot more sense. And so getting the capacity to be able to do that, and then to be able to offer a variety of STEM learning opportunities to our secondary community, we think enhances the entire school programming. Now, as for world language, the reason why we would, look to trade in one of these world language, again, we have another STEM teacher that would give us to that 3 number. Over the last couple of years, because we've allowed the 7th and 8th graders to take more high school courses in the area, which is in the area of language, we've seen a significant increase in the interest in that area. And we believe that it's an area we need to focus on, not just for the purpose of building well-rounded global community citizens and people who can speak a second language. I think that's all very valuable, and it's part of our strategic design. But it's also hooked to this 6th grade transition. We currently have a writing specialist that we put in the budget a couple years ago. We've used it in a couple different ways, but we believe that, similar to the technology discussion of firming up our foundation, over in that middle school area, when in the curriculum, according to the Common Core standards and some other areas, the level of close reading and the level of technical reading or informational text starts to increase at that point in time. And there are different types of skills that our learners need to be successful. Once again, not learning to read necessarily, but learning to read so that they can read to learn. And so we believe that starting the 6th grade and intensifying the efforts in English language arts, specifically in writing, so giving more of a double dose of writing and of reading. But in order to do that, you want to make sure that you have the people who are most qualified to teach that. Hence, changing the ELA instructor to a reading specialist, different set of credentials, different set of skills, whole different preparation. You're putting putting someone in place in front of our learners or with our learners who have a different expertise. It doesn't mean that any specific teacher who would be in that role would lose a position. That's not at all what that would mean. It does mean that we would look for someone, maybe it's internal, maybe we have to go out for it, who has the specific skill set we want for that reading specialist role to increase that literacy. Certainly also in 7th and 8th grade, and not in 6th grade, but we do that for 6th grade, but in 7th and 8th grade, we'd intensify that world language opportunity. And there is enough literature. Literature has been written on research. I have not read a lot of the research because it's been around for a long period of time, but the literature, there's tons of literature, tons of educational journals and so forth that have pointed to the, quality world language instruction and learning helps support the increase of your own languages learning. So becoming better students of English, both in writing and in speaking and in, I said both, in all 3 areas of speaking, writing, and reading as well. So we feel that it really supports the literacy emphasis that we want to have. Certainly, we talked earlier about changing a study hall coordinator who's there, putting those pieces together to have one person in addition to the librarian in that library to help support, because we want to focus on a culture of literacy. Now, literacy is very broad. It's not just reading literacy. What I just talked about focuses on that, but also on STEM literacy, which is what we've also, in the library is actually a key piece of that, and really should be the center of the entire school if developed and formed properly. And I believe we have the staffing for that. I believe we have the future planning that we're going to continue to work on in place for that. And I believe that we have also a set of standards that are going to be asked of us to meet for accreditation that go along with the movement that we're making here, or seeking to make. Yes, Laurel?
Do you anticipate introducing a new language?
Well, so not next year, but that's something we should be talking about in the weeks to follow, because we have had conversations about possibly offering some other types of languages. This would allow us to perhaps broaden that down the road. We do, even right now, we have an individual who is qualified or can get qualified to teach like introductory Mandarin. And I have contacts actually in this region who could help us start something like that. So that would be a great opportunity for our learners in our community. Even if you're not going to learn the entire language, getting a good dose of that would be excellent and a great experience, something worth offering for our kids. We'd have to determine whether that's something we want to invest in or do.
Right. All right, any other questions or comments for Ruben tonight for Saturday? Okay. Thanks, Ruben.
Yep, you're welcome.
Very detailed, lots of information, lots of thoughts. Okay, looking forward to Saturday. Discussions. Next up is the winter co-curricular handbook. I don't know, it basically put into the handbook the presentation that we had from Heather and Dave.
Yeah, just some quick notes. Nick, did you want to add any notes to this? Or I can too.
Yes. Yeah, I can talk to it.
Okay.
So this is just a draft, format, kind of mirroring it. All the other handbooks that we've done in our framework so far, trying to keep things in a similar format, just to kind of create a series of handbooks and things. So this really just is distilling everything that we've been talking about for the past couple board sessions. I kind of distilled all the information, sent it off to Heather, sent it off to David, sent it off to Ruben, make sure that all the people that have kind of been kind of fostering this stuff we're okay with it, that we weren't missing anything. So obviously, like I said, both David and Heather are here. I'm certainly happy to patch them in, and they can answer any more detailed questions. Like I said, my role in this was purely to kind of pull it together and make it look like our other stuff. So
do we have any questions for David or Heather?
I can just say that I've been in and observed a few of the skills sessions or the sessions that have been in the weight room, and people have had their masks on. There were a couple times where they were below the nose and I had to let them know, but the people were following the guidance. We are purchasing masks as part of the uniform. They're very specific for this purpose. They look neat. So that's important to note. But most everything else was what was presented before. I know that the coaches have been trained on disinfecting and so forth as well. And
okay,
I think it's good to see in these smaller cohorts, whether it be this or whether it be some of the learning pods that we have implemented, and we'll try to keep on implementing, to see how that also goes over this next month as we make decisions about fully returning to our initial state.
Right. Okay.
Well, I think that Heather and David did a good job in this handbook. I think that this is the first, you have your winter sports, and this is the first time we're addressing winter sports under these conditions. And we'll have the same thing happen again in the spring. So they're dealing with a constantly changing set of sports that they have to deal with throughout the year. And each one has their own unique little differences. Ice hockey has its different obstacles, I guess, or different impediments than basketball. So I think they're doing a great job in terms of dealing with the sports as well as doing it with the clubs.
I think that is one thing that I forgot to kind of mention and explain is I know that some of our discussions at the board level have been very sports centric, just because that's kind of the new component, the new kind of unknown based on a lot of our sports all of our sports were outside in the fall, and now we're coming in for the winter session. But one of the things that was added into this handbook is we did try to weave in this idea of advisors, learners, club participation. Even good in the past a little bit. I know Heather worked with all the different schools. We have a K through 9 animation club that started up. They're meeting remotely, so the efforts are still being made on the clubs and activities level, so that we're trying to reach as many students as possible during this period, realizing that there's potential social, emotional things that need to be taken into consideration. So.
Yep. Thanks. Okay. So the reopening framework is next. The changes.
Are you guys going to take up any action on this, or is this purely a informational at this point?
We have to approve all of these, right?
Well, you may not approve, like for instance, reopening framework changes with the CDC guidance. You might not like the CDC guidance and want to make those changes. So I don't know if you want to take it one at a time.
Okay. Probably best do it one at a time then. Charlie?
Yeah, I would like to move that we adopt a 2021 co-curricular handbook.
All right. Sorry, did I hear?
Patty, second.
That was Patty, thank you.
I tried really hard to push this last meeting. I think you don't remember.
All right.
I'm not done.
So roll call vote. Laurel?
Yes.
Thank you. Heidi?
Yes.
Thank you. Leisha?
Yes.
Thank you. John?
Yes.
Thank you. Patty?
Aye.
And Charlie? Charlie? Yeah, thank you. And I say yes, so that's been adopted. 700. Okay, now the reopening framework, the CDC guideline changes.
So there's two things to address on this. We did make some framework changes, some specific things, and then we ended up just kind of pulling the CDC stuff out as its own kind of discussion. So in terms of reopening framework changes, there's a few things. Obviously, our athletics and activities section was pretty tailored to the fall session. So that's been shortened and kind of just refers to the book that you guys just approved. One of the other major changes is, we've been talking about it, but we didn't have that change for close contact, the CDC definition, which is changed to a cumulative period of 10 minutes. So those changes have been made. So again, popped in that the DPHS. This is exactly what they say on all their documents everywhere. So 6 feet total, 10 cumulative minutes, beginning 24 hours prior to illness. I think there was one other change. Obviously, anything that we change tonight will be made in the flowcharts. We did in the handbook make some changes to when buildings could be open. We previously said, I believe 4 o'clock was the kind of cutoff, but obviously due to some sports and games, we have to extend that out. Just scanning through real quick to make sure I'm not forgetting anything. Yeah, we also looked at food services, specific to remote. We've implemented our delivery program. So putting some language in there. We've also expanded our pickup times at each school, our location in Jaffrey and Ridge, for food pickups. So just giving people an extra hour to be able to pick up their food. And then again, like I said, we have 4 buses operating Monday and Thursday. Those depart at 9 and go for about an hour and a half. I believe there's about 50 to 60 kids being served by each bus route. I can get the more specific number if you guys are interested. And then obviously just the winter co-curriculars. So those are the kind of more solid changes, and then obviously there's some CDC additional changes.
So Are we okay with these changes? Are there some that we need to discuss, accept, not accept? Personally, I think that, you know, we should accept them.
I agree.
So I'll make a
Okay.
motion that we change the reopening framework.
All right, thank you, Charlie. Second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Heidi. All right, and roll call vote. Patty?
Aye.
Laurel?
Aye.
Alicia?
Yes.
John?
Aye.
Heidi?
Yes.
Charlie? And I say yes as well, so that too passes 700. Thank you. Next up is the remote learning handbook.
Okay, the CDC stuff.
Oh, sorry, CDC, sorry.
Do you want me to speak to this? Does Ruben want to speak to this? Does somebody else want to speak
Oh,
to it?
yeah. I mean, we had a conversation earlier. I mean, I think it was public discussion.
Comments.
That the guidance from the CDC has shifted with regards to quarantine, and to my knowledge, it hasn't been accepted widely, but I'm not entirely sure up to this point.
New Hampshire has accepted it.
New Hampshire did?
They did, yeah.
Oh, it did. Okay. Okay. So we have different language in our opening framework with regard to quarantine. And so it's as stated, 10 days without testing, or 7 days if you have that negative test result.
Right. Nick?
Yeah, so Charlie corrected me. We're in the same room. The state did accept the change from 14 to 10 days. It seems like they did not accept the 7-day test out. So there's two main issues to talk about tonight. One of them was something that we had discussed prior. We didn't make a decision on to put into the framework. That being making this change for travel specifically. So right now our framework still says 14 days. So we need to make a decision as to whether we're going to adopt this for travel guidelines and then also just in general. So, the board can adopt. I mean, again, the travel guidelines are, a little more widely accepted because they've been out for a while now. The more general quarantine was a more recent, I believe it was last Wednesday that the CDC announced this. So obviously people have been discussing it a lot more frequently lately.
Okay. John?
Yes, I appreciate Nick's comments. It's a little hard to hear them completely, especially given the mask and all. I don't know if Ruben could highlight that a little bit more as to the 10-day versus the 7-day and what we should be voting on.
Well, so currently we have, if there's travel outside of New England, we have individuals needing to quarantine for 14 days.
Right.
Also, we have in our handbook that if an individual is exposed to a confirmed case, that they quarantine for that time frame as well. Or I believe that's correct. Is that correct, Nick? 14 days?
Yeah, right now everything that we have quarantine-wise is 14 days.
14 days, that's right. We had 10 at one point, and then we changed it to 14 in a couple different areas when things were updated. The CDC has recently changed it from 14 days to 10 days. They've also recommended or have stated that they'd be fine with 7 days if you have a negative test. Like for instance, on day 5, you might get a test, and then 2 days later you get the results back and it's negative. So after that time frame, you'd be able to return. So we don't have any of that in our framework, the 10 days or the 7 days. What Nick indicated, and I hadn't heard that the state had adopted the 10 days, but I guess they have. I was pretty
It's
certain
Friday.
they had not adopted the 7. But is whether we want to do that as well, whether we want to change our quarantine period from 14 days to 10 days. And I believe there's 2 instances. Is that correct, Nick? One of them is for travel outside of New England, and the other is for contact.
Yes.
Okay. So, discussion. John?
Yeah, so, I mean, it sounds like the 10 days instead of the 14 is perhaps reasonable. If the state has considered it and the CDC, then, you know, hopefully that is safe to go with. I'd be more concerned about the testing because we do hear reports of tests that can be taken and show one result. It sounds like the tests are less reliable, and I'd be much more hesitant to go with the 7-day if you test out.
Yeah. And I think that's why the state has gone with the 10.
Yeah. Right.
Other thoughts?
Well, my understanding is that the reason they went with the 10-day is because after 10 days, you have a 1% to 10% probability of still transmitting, okay? When they moved to 7 days, Dr. Chang said that the probabilities the risk factors went up too high. So the percentage was up well above 5%. To start with. So that's the reason they went from the 14 to the 10 days is because by doing that, it only increased the risk by 1%.
Right. Okay.
And just to let everybody know, the link that's up right now that we're all looking at, this does summarize a lot of what Charlie just said about the 1 to 10%. This is the CDC's release on that Wednesday when they made this. They still do say the current recommendation is 14, but they're again going into that statistical analysis that Charlie just mentioned.
Right. So, do we want to change ours to 10?
I think what John suggested makes sense. Go from 14 to 10, but pass on 7 days after a test.
Yeah, I think the point is that in that it's about taking the test, and it can't be more than 48 hours old on the 7th day, that kind of thing. But yes, I'm probably more comfortable with the 10 days myself.
This is Patty. I think factoring in the fact that some folks are going to have symptoms, not going to get tested, they're still not going to get tested if it's a 7-day situation. So I say the 10 days is probably the best bet. It's most consistent.
Yeah, sounds good.
And
right.
easier to administer.
Yes. Less paper. Okay. Can we get a motion then?
So I'll make the motion that we move to a 10-day quarantine period from the 14 based on the CDC and state recommendations.
Right. Thank you, John. And I need a second.
Second.
Thank you, Laurel. All right. Roll call vote. Patty.
Aye.
Thank you. Charlie.
Aye.
Thank you, Laurel.
Aye.
Thank you. Heidi.
Aye.
Thank you, Alicia.
Yes.
Thank you, John.
Aye.
Thank you, and I say aye as well, so that passes 7-0-0. Change it to 10 days. Okay, now on to the remote learning handbook changes.
Yeah, the only change to the remote learning handbook is that there has been language added to our handbook specific to learning pods. So this is all information that's based on potential stages and information about expectations and the definition. Just kind of trying to put a more concrete position out there. I haven't double checked, but I am pretty sure that Jen Horn is here, and we'd be able to patch her in and answer any questions about this if that's something the board was interested in.
Yeah, and if we can also maybe just a sense of how, I mean, it's only been happening for this week, but this past week, but it'd be great to just know how it went. Hi, Jen.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now.
Okay. My Google just crashed on my other computer, so hey, that's exciting. So I can give you a little bit of information. We had about 50 students that we invited to stage 1, and of those, about 41 have started between Thursday and Friday of last week and Monday of this week, so roughly. So that's a pretty good turnout for our stage 1 group. Our stage 2 group of kids that met criteria in a variety of different ways is quite a lot larger. Quite a lot larger. And the difficulty really that we're having is staffing. So those that we have been able to bring in, staffing is playing a huge role in how we determine how many kids can come in and where. And based on our current staffing ability moving forward, we can bring in about 15 more kids into Jaffrey grade, roughly 7 more learners into Ringe, and about 30 more learners into the middle and high school for the next. And then that's pretty much going to tap what we have.
So probably not even half of the students that
we would have, that we would have tagged as
right.
at need or meeting the criteria.
Right.
So we've had to be really careful and consistent about the criteria that we're using and how we're making decisions for students. We did decide to do 2 half days for each cohort, which allows us to have twice as many kids in, which is fantastic. They're just in half as much, but at least we're getting some for a larger group of students. I don't know what else you're interested in knowing. I will tell you right now that we've had some instances where some of our staff have been directly or indirectly touched by COVID, which then impacts our ability to continue to maintain already as the numbers go up. So that's a major consideration in all of this piece.
I will say, if I can add to it, a thank you. We haven't really figured it all out yet completely, but I believe you and Kelly and Heather and have been working on a lot of different options. And one of those options in the town of Ringe is Dan Bemis at the Recreation Department has offered to be a site if possible. And so we're still, like I said, we're still working out the details. We have already provided internet hubs, so hotspots for that area in hopes that that's going to take place. And he might be able to take 10, 15, maybe 20 learners. I don't know. I think 15 is kind of what we're hoping for, if that would be a high end. But we're really excited that he would work as a community partner with us in this endeavor. One of the really only routes we are allowed to take and consider for pods, learning pods, by the definition of this with the state guidance is municipalities, recreation departments. And so the Ringe Recreation Department has worked with us in planning for that. And so we'll consequently be working with families, and Kelly, the principal, will help with that.
I would also like to say that we've worked really collaboratively with the bus company and the food program to make sure that all students that are coming in, those that come in on Monday and Tuesday, take meals home on Monday, and those that come in on Thursday and Friday take meals home on Thursday. And the bus company also is transporting as students request transport. They're continuing to, and it's been every couple days, Mark, I have a change. And he's like, okay, and has to change the whole thing. But it has been a good, solid community effort to try to get as many learners in for support as we can.
That's great.
Good. So I'm just thinking if it's municipal, right, that we can use. And, like what else falls under municipal besides the rec departments?
It really is stated similarly to municipalities like rec departments because they follow so many guidelines with their background pieces.
Right.
And that's where that falls into, is the safety of students.
Okay.
I don't think there really is a whole lot else.
Do libraries follow the same sort of? No.
Yeah.
Isn't that interesting? But no.
Yeah. Patty.
I find it really interesting. We were discussing all the different criteria. I think people think that, all the teachers have their assignments. The teachers are teaching their classes, whether they're a 4th grade teacher or 7th or 12th grade. So they're already booked. They're off they're not available. And so I think that's what's hard for people. It's really a very small number of people who can actually be deployed into this. I think that's what's so hard for people to fathom, and that it's bringing kids together when we're not able to really do that.
We're trying not, yeah.
Larger scale.
I think that's a really fabulous point, Patty, that when we really structured the remote learning handbook in the fall, and we said that teachers are, when we have to go remote, teachers are going to really put live teaching, and there's your schedule is your schedule, and kids are going to be invested. There's some really great gains in that. Our kids have really structured days, and there's stuff to do all of the time. The difficulty with that, the pro of that is as a whole, students have a place to be, and education is moving forward somewhat seamlessly. The con is that we don't have very much staff that we can leverage in this way.
A couple of questions I just wanted to ask has there been any contact with the Jaffrey Recreation Department? Is there any possibilities there? I know they don't have the same setup that the Ringe Department does, but I'm just curious whether there's been any efforts there.
Yeah, Heather Lindstad was the one who was overseeing that effort, and it didn't work out.
It's a shame we haven't bought St. Pat's yet.
Just to follow up on the question of the libraries, I know that the Jaffrey Library certainly participated with the town in terms of coming up with emergency planning steps, and they've been very thorough, I would say, in terms of their procedures for using caution. So are they disallowed as a potential site, or is it just not something that
they don't have visitors, so that would make it pretty hard.
I think they have right now. I mean, I'm sure they'd love to.
Very limited.
But I don't think they have a lot of people entering the facility on a.
You have to make an appointment to go there.
Yeah.
Right. Well, one wonders, and I wonder this about the Jaffrey Rec Department too, is whether they could obtain the usage of another facility. you know, I'm sure they've got staffing issues too, as well as staffing concerns, but, you know, just the fact that they don't have, you know, a building that's adequate doesn't mean there's not space available in some of the local strip malls. I did have one other
or even our
question though.
school,
Jen.
perhaps, yeah.
Or within
Or
the
our
school.
Oh, yes, okay, right.
I mean, they
Right.
could run
empty.
program in our school, so they could run program in our school.
Right.
Ironically, yes.
Yeah.
Heidi.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if there's any role for volunteers to be like, additional people to help with students. I'm thinking of college kids who are home who could, you know, maybe volunteer a couple mornings a week to be an extra body to help, particularly with the younger learners. But, or if there, I don't know who, Ruben, we were talking earlier, the people who are helping with the food deliveries on the bus routes, are they people from our cafeterias, or are we using any of our associates to do that? I mean, are they people that could be freed up, and could we potentially have volunteers helping with that, the food deliveries on the bus routes? I'm just trying to think of more. It's an issue of needing more people to help more than it is space, correct?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's the adults to be able to monitor and support. Certainly, there's a lot more support that goes into working with younger elementary kids than, say, a sophomore or a junior in high school. For most of the time, anyway, that's the case. And we do have, you know, we do have some SAU staff that is, we're going to be having conversations tomorrow about kind of taking on and trading some times to create some of those possibilities, some learning pod possibilities. To answer your question directly about the lunch routes, I think we do have 1 or 2 support staff that are on that. Jen, correct me if I'm wrong. I know things have changed a little bit. That likely could be utilized that way if we had other people.
Right.
And I know that we have had to find different people to ride the bus as a result of that shortage.
Sure. So definitely the people who may have had flexibility, associates that may have had flexibility, were definitely the ones that signed up to do buses, but they're also the people that would have flexibility to work with students directly. So it's definitely easier to get other volunteers to do the bus routes. You don't have to have a background check. You don't have to be Corey checked to get on a bus and hand out some meals as much as and you don't have to understand learning and curriculum and Google Classroom, and you just ride along and get off when they tell you to. So definitely we're trying to shift that and take the associates that had volunteered to do that and absorb that in different ways so that the associates can take a couple more students.
That just seems like an easy volunteer opportunity. It's a pretty safe, you know, thing that I think some people would be willing to do if we could ask for volunteers, particularly for that, to free up those associates. It might make sense.
Mm-hmm.
Jen, is there, do the students who participate in the learning pods also use, you know, access to remote learning?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's learning pods, or you just come to school to do your remote learning instead of doing your remote learning at home. So you come in, we get them in as soon as we can and get them logged in before their morning meeting or their first class. And then the staff supports them, make sure they're on the class they're supposed to. When there's transitions in between, they help them go through their Google Classrooms. Here's what you're missing. Let's help you make a list of what you need to work on when you get home until we see you again. But they're still expected to be getting that instruction from their teachers is still remote. So it's not instead of remote learning. It's a support for remote learning.
So I imagine some of them don't have access to internet, for example, or maybe they don't have a good space, but are there some of them at least who can actually go home and continue to, you know, have access to their teachers remotely? Or?
Yeah, I think so. Our first stage was really a different population of students that just required some more supports. there's a lot of reasons that remote learning doesn't work. And one of them is internet connectivity. And it's one of them.
Right. Right.
For those people who internet connectivity, that's the barrier right now. Not that it's a perfect fix, because this is a difficult region. But we did order another 50 or so hotspots so that we can provide those out. Which is what some of them what we're using for the Ringe Recreation Department, because they don't have enough internet service for 15 kids.
You know, it's great that you're making all these efforts to think outside the box and try and find solutions. It's not perfect, but I bet it's going to get better. You ought to be congratulated for it.
Okay, thank you. So if there's no other questions at this point, are we good with the language and doing a motion on and vote on that?
I move we adopt the revised remote learning handbook.
All right, thank you, Laurel.
I'll second.
Who seconded? I heard two.
Let Alicia have it.
Okay. Okay. So I'll do a roll call vote. Charlie?
Aye.
Thank you, Laurel.
Aye.
Thank you, Alicia.
Yes.
Thank you, Heidi.
Yes.
Thank you, John.
Yes.
Thank you, Patty.
Yes.
And I say yes as well. And so that change carries 700. And we're on to the budget calendar, budget development calendar, and then deliberative session. So can I just ask the board, last week there was New Hampshire School Board Association webinar on annual meeting. I attended and Nick did. I just wondered if other board members did. No? Okay.
Thank you for getting smart for us.
Yeah, Nick and I, we're working at it. It takes two of us, but.
Can we still access the webinar?
I have, both Nick and I have the information that we can easily share.
That was sent out to the board last week, at least the documents that they shared. I don't know if they've released a video or if they will, but I can certainly ask if they have it.
So, all right. Who's going to talk to this one? Ruben? Or is it Nick? Or
You want me to write it down just because I was at the webinar?
Let's go for it, Nick. It will be good if basically this is something we put into place, a lot earlier. Carrie is also, well, maybe Carrie is with us at this point in time. I'm not entirely sure. She was earlier and could speak to some of these items, but obviously locations and the deliberative session has information that you've received and that we've gone over changes some things perhaps. So, Nick certainly has the deliberative session down pat. He's explained it about 7 different times that I've heard. So.
Yeah, so this is technically still a draft calendar, actually, this budget development calendar. And a lot of the dates that are put on this, you see a lot of like state SB2 deadlines and things of that nature. And when you have these dates, they're usually, there's a formula in the law and some other things to kind of decide when you need to have, say a warrant article in or a time frame in which you have to have a budget or a bond hearing or a deliberative session or many other things. So a lot of those, those red dates that you're seeing, RSA's reference, so on and so forth. That's all valid. Obviously we have that meeting on Saturday. Ruben did bring up locations. A lot of our calendar information, at least the generic, kind of overview ones, states these physical meeting locations, which were, due to COVID not following. It's been quite some time that we've been having a digital component to our meeting, but we've also had this physical meeting space. Myself, Charlie are both at the Dakota High School Music Group right now. So we do have a physical meeting space, but also this digital component now. A big part of what was discussed at the School Board Association meeting was this. There was a House bill that was approved. It was 1129, and you guys have a lot of the documentation that was shared. But essentially, what it does is it offers alternative methods of kind of running our sessions when it comes to deliberative and voting. And I've talked to some people about it, and it sounds like there's still a lot of kind of legal things that haven't quite been determined, because this was passed in July. It was a specific reaction to some of the things that had happened with last March's voting session. A couple towns and their processes were kind of referenced as the framework, but essentially what it boils down to is that there is an alternative option to our typical, deliberative session voting process. Just to really basically summarize it, not getting into a lot of the laws and specifics. Instead of deliberative session, we could hold this kind of hybrid online session where we'd split it into 2 meetings. You'd have your first meeting that would be an informational session where you would present your budget, your warrant articles, and then you would state the ways in which the public can respond to that. You wouldn't actually have a feedback session online, just because it would be an online meeting. So what you would do is you would provide an opportunity for the public to comment, whether it be email, letter, whatever we wanted to decide. We'd have a week in between the 2 meetings, and then the board would take that feedback. The board would actually be the ones to potentially alter the warrant articles. So that's an alternative method that we could, potentially explore. The other change would be that instead of a traditional voting session, what we could do is we could offer some sort of drive-through voting where people would drive to a location. There'd be a balloting process, where they kind of stay in their car. Again, there's still a lot of kind of legal matters that are kind of being brought up that makes this not as clear-cut as, just saying this is the potential process. The law doesn't specifically reference cooperative school districts, which we are. We have one town that is an SB2 town, which we are also SB2. We have one town that follows a town meeting format. We, based on this law, would have to hold our voting on the same day that we normally do. But Jaffrey has a little bit more freedom, it sounds, to move things around if they so choose. Obviously, if we don't align with the towns, there's potential additional steps that the district would have to take in order to run voting. When it comes to deliberative, some of those things, holding the 2 meetings. What we would also have to do is add a warrant article to the ballot, and it would appear at the top, and it would essentially validate the process that we used. So if we got enough, yes votes, then great. The budget and all the other warrant articles are going to, either pass or fail on their, number of people saying yes and no. But if we have a no vote on that warrant article that says no, we don't approve of the process, then it essentially, makes that all moot, and we can't approve any warrant articles because they don't agree with the process. So. There's a different avenue that we could choose based on COVID in order to have an alternative voting process, but it's not without its challenges, or at least without its differences and things that we would have to do differently.
So I've been in discussion with Bob Shaman, our moderator, about this as well. And he and I both tend to be, and I think Nick, after going through and thinking this through, I think you can chime in on this, but our feeling is if we can make our process as normal as possible, that's our best route. there's, you know, too many changes and we run risk for the wrong reasons of things not passing. You know, it's one thing if people disagree with a warrant article and they vote it down. It's another thing if they don't check the box right, or they do something, they don't understand that first warrant article. It could all go down just because of that one question.
And I think the reason why we wanted to at least put the information out here to the board tonight is the other big component, if we are to change the process, is there's a pretty hefty notification process of the public, which involves really spelling out the new process, and it really, we have to notify every registered voter. So, you know, that means like if we have multiple voters and same residents, we gotta send that out to everybody. You know, we gotta make sure that everybody's really specifically aware of how they can communicate their thoughts and ideas about the budget and other board articles. So, you know, ultimately it's the board's, you know, decision to do whatever you guys choose. I mean, this is, you know, something that I was just, you know, made aware of on Wednesday, so I'm still doing some research. You know, there's certainly, so we can talk with legal folks to see, you know, what kind of potential ramifications we could have in doing this alternative process. But just wanted to at least start the discussion because, you know, these dates are moving, are coming up pretty fast, and there are things we'd have to do if we chose an alternative path.
And I know Bob has also been in touch with the State Department, is what he was waiting to hear back. So if I don't hear from him by Wednesday, I'm going to contact him and see what he's learned that might be beyond what we already know.
So Marcia.
Yes.
As moderator yes. For Range, I have notified the governing body, which is the selectmen, to use extreme caution when reviewing HB 1129. It is fraught with vagaries, and there are practical issues that present problems. I have the guidance from the NHSBA. I have the guidance from the New Hampshire Municipal Association. I'm meeting with the Secretary of State, Dave Scanlon, and Bud Fitch on Thursday. We're having a con call to review the election, and at that point in time, I expect this whole issue to come up. But having reviewed all of the documentation and guidance presented, there are a lot of practical issues that sound very simple in what was presented at the NHSBA. But as a practical matter, they create problems. And some very simple examples. We all know what the weather can be like in March. And there's no way that I'm going to be able to get poll workers and to stand outside for 6 hours in March to do process drive-through voting. There's no way that I can have a single line of cars, because usually we use 4 checklists, and we have roughly about 900 voters. If I have to use one checklist, because if you use more than one checklist, then what you do is you have an opportunity for people to vote twice. One through one line, one through the other. So you have to use a single checklist with a single line of cars. And if I've got people with 900 cars lining up, there's no way I can process them in the 10 minutes that's allowed by statute. I mean, there's just practical issues all over the place. For one thing, when we had the regular election, the Secretary of State did not want drive-through voting for the simple reason that it was his opinion that more than 2 voters marking ballots in a car did not constitute a secret ballot. So there's just one thing after another. So until some of these issues are resolved and questions answered, I'm advising the governing body to be very cautious about implementing HB 1129.
Yeah. Well, that's why I was saying, as normal as we can make this, it's the better.
So would we have our
Absolutely.
budget hearing in person?
I think so.
On January 14th?
Is there a voting process?
Hold on, Nick was talking and then John, okay? So
Sure.
let Nick finish and then.
Yeah, my thoughts is I know that we've been allowing public comment and things like that through Zoom and having these, you know, kind of more interactive video meetings. I would think that for some of these more official meetings where there's voting and other things at play, but budget hearing deliberative session, I think that we would obviously broadcast it so that people, you know, could listen. But I think that there would be no, it would be made clear that there would be no back and forth in a digital means. Like if you would want to make a comment on the budget, anything else, you would be in person for those meetings. And we would, you know, the Pratt, one of these larger settings that we have available, socially distanced seating, or whatever we decided we wanted to do for safety precautions, and then the Zoom component that we've been implementing would purely be a broadcast for those who just wanted to hear at home.
Is there a possibility that we would have something like, I don't know, because I think that the RMS's gymnasium is larger than the Pratt, but you have that location for your primary location, and then there are satellite rooms where voters could be and could be in person, but viewing it virtually, but also being able to vote. So, as to limit the number of people in any one area.
So when you're talking about voting, are you talking about on amendments? Is this deliberative session?
I'm talking about someone saying, hey, I'd like to, I don't know, I think the usual.
Amend an article.
We want to add $2 million to the budget. And so there's like a bunch of people who want to do that. And so they vote and so forth. So always adding 2 million. And so something like that nature. So at the deliberative session.
Well, if you look at what the emergency order from the governor states, it states that you need to have social distancing and that you need to wear masks if you can't social distance unless you're members of a family unit. So what that says to me anyway is that people need to be 6 feet apart unless they're members of a family unit, then they can sit together. And if you're not 6 feet apart, you have to wear a mask. Now we can require that everybody wears a mask. There's nothing that prevents it. We can't do that for voting, but we can do that for a deliberative session. Because there's no constitutional right in a deliberative session like there is in a
voting.
Right to vote.
Right. Right.
So when it comes to a budget hearing, I'm not sure I see a problem to do that on Zoom. And you know, we can have a site available as Nick has one and Charlie has one available tonight. But in that case, it's just input. And that can happen the way we do on our board, and then we can vote as a board after receiving the input. On the questions of the deliberative session and the voting day, those are, you know, best practices issues. And I think we're doing just the right thing in raising the questions now. And, you know, Bob Schauman and Charlie, I have complete confidence in them. This has got to get sorted out. It's going to take some time. There's still a few months. And I think we should consider taking advantage of the School Board Association attorney as well in terms of answering questions. So.
Yeah, that's who presented.
He would be willing to come to our board meeting too if we had a need for such a thing.
To answer Ruben's prior question of the possibility of having like satellite locations, that was something that was also discussed at the School Board Association meeting, this idea of there is an ability, and I believe they even cited some specific examples of it taking place, of this idea of creating either rooms or different environments where you could have select groupings of people and have some sort of patch in so that they could still be around for deliberative and have that still constitute more of a normal meeting. It would warrant a lot more investigation just to see what specific legalities there are within those rooms, like what kind of connection is specifically needed. If there was a vote taken, what are the specific steps needed to like determine what the vote is in each room? You know, if we have 10 rooms, like how is it that we actually collect the vote from each of those locations? So if the board wanted an investigation into what that could entail, it's a possibility. You know, I believe that we would have the technical infrastructure to do it. It's just a question of making sure that, you know, obviously we're within the law of what we have to do and provide.
Okay. Any other thoughts or comments at this point? No. Whoops. So there's no, we don't have to take an action right now on this, but I think we'll probably end up thinking more about this between now, Saturday. I think, Nick, hadn't we said we'd like to have a decision on format so we can get word out quicker?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the sooner the better, just because, you know, holidays coming up. And then if you look at the proposed and some of these kind of set in stone deadlines, you know, one question that I have to specifically figure out is, you know, there's a defined window for SB2 when those meetings need to be held. And House Bill 1129 says that if you split into 2 meetings, they have to be a week apart. So I don't know.
Within a week.
Yeah, within a week. The School Board Association didn't really seem too solid on when specifically that first kind of alternate deliberative session would need to be held, which again is just kind of another question about this process. But, you know, obviously we're looking at a window of that big meeting being, you know, we usually hold it, I think, the first Wednesday in February. So, you know, if we have to notify everybody, and right now we're about 2 months out. So by the time we return from the holidays and everything, you know, then we have about a month to properly communicate. So again, just the more notice we can have, the better.
So am I being realistic with saying if we can nail things on Saturday around this?
So, sorry, what is it you want to nail, Marcia?
What we're going to do and making sure that we have the dates as they should be. And then, you know, like what format leading up to what's going to be faced, if, you know, all of those decisions.
Okay, so I just think that, you know, the idea of using extreme caution is a good one. And I think we should be, if we're sure by Saturday, we're confident, we've got a consensus between the 2 towns on how it will work, okay, great. But if not, I mean, this is not a Jaffrey Range problem. There's many school districts within the state struggling with the same issue. So let's see what the state has to say.
Marcia,
Yes.
is there a concern that Jaffrey will not have polling on the 2nd Tuesday in March?
I don't believe that's a concern.
Okay. So that part we think is solved. I mean, Jeffrey may very well postpone its town meeting, but there will still be a polling place.
Yes.
I
Okay.
think the thought for me and the reason why I wanted to bring it forward is just, you know, if the board has any sort of consensus on what way, like if you guys don't want to pursue the 1129 route, there's no point in, you know, reaching out to attorneys and, you know, potentially having that be a cost and spending a bunch of time and effort into researching the validity to our district in doing it. You know, if it's something that you guys have an interest in moving forward to, with the legwork can be done, but if, you know, it's presented and the board is saying, no, we don't really want to go this route, we'd like to have a meeting in person, you know, there's no point in expending the time and the resources needed to investigate it.
I would be prepared to say that we should have the deliberative session as close to normal as possible.
All right. So
And you could poll the board right now and see where
right. So what's it? I mean, Charlie, you've said that as well. I said that. What's that? What other? Alicia?
I tend to agree with that line of thought, to just hold it as normal as possible.
Okay, thanks. And how about Heidi?
Yeah, I think that makes sense as well.
Okay, John?
Yes, of course. I think it makes sense. The question is, what does that mean? You know.
Right, it's like, what precautions do we have to put in place to ensure safety, as safe as we can? Patty?
I agree. And while it is the voting is about the district, and I mean, the checklist folks need to be engaged. The town clerk needs to be I mean, this is not something we decide like in our own little pod using different frame of pod.
Right.
But I agree, as normal as possible. March seems like a long time from now. I mean,
well, the deliberative is in February.
Right, but.
And if we make any changes, those
and notices have to be posted.
Right.
No, I agree. I think that we just forge, I guess my point is we forge ahead because a lot can change between now and March and things could be better.
Well, and Carrie just put in a little chat message that actually puts a little bit more urgency on the decision. She brings up that there are deadlines related to publishing the public notices in newspaper for early January. So locations and things like that do need to be in the public notice. So rather than, you know, it does create that additional urgency into having a firm decision and direction.
Marcia, did you say that you expect to be talking with Bob Schauman this week? Oh, we lost Marcia.
Yes, he was hoping to hear back from whoever he spoke to.
Okay.
And yes.
Okay.
Bottom line, yes.
He typically is the person that coordinates the supervisors of the checklist and all that.
I believe so.
Okay. So it might be good to find out if he's actually reached out to them and, you know, sussed out.
Okay.
He has to check with Sam too.
Yes, our district clerk.
Because I don't know how prepared Sam is to do the things that the town clerk might normally do. If the district has to do something different.
I spoke to Sam Lewis this morning just to alert her that these conversations are at least being had. And she did bring up some of those concerns, just the idea that if we do change processes and we're different than the towns, then there's, you know, a lot of additional steps that the district would have to take on, you know, if we're holding a different voting session or something like that. You know, obviously those are things that we have to coordinate more than we would if we are just, you know, doing what the towns are doing.
All right, so all I was saying, back to, you think by Saturday we can have, like, be able to have the information that we need to be able to say, okay, here's what needs to get posted, here's what the location, here's how the format, that. And maybe some of the finer details, not quite, but I just think we have to get it done before the holidays go out.
Yes.
So if you have a chance, look over stuff that Nick sent out, just so you're not just taking our word for it, but you looked at it a little bit, that would be great. Where are we? See. Alicia, are you headed that?
Sorry, you're breaking up. I couldn't hear you. Yeah, so we have.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
We have a policy for second reading. So that one should be pretty straightforward. And then 2 other J policies that we went through and amended based on changes in the RSA as recommended by the NHSBA. And so those changes are highlighted.
This one right here is the second read.
Right, which actually is more like a third read, isn't it? Okay, so for the first read, are there any, I mean, it was pretty straightforward. There's nothing that, any discussion there? No.
And
Okay.
the 2 of those have pretty much the same change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that's still just the first read. So going to the second read, which is really kind of like our third or fourth on this because we tweaked it a few times to try and make it better. Are there any questions tonight, or are we ready to accept this?
I have a question.
Okay.
Okay. So the way I read this, the superintendent can reassign, given our current student population, up to 12 students a year to another school.
Where are you seeing the number 12?
That's what I'm like.
Well, it says up to 1% of the average daily membership. It's number 6.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
I'm not that good at math, so. And then anything over that has to go to the board.
Yeah. So my, my question has to do with the, is this with the understanding that there is no tuition involved?
Well, the policy wouldn't say that, or doesn't say that.
Right. It doesn't.
Nick, could you scroll to 6?
Sometimes in these situations, tuition could be involved, and also a negotiation between superintendents sometimes can be involved, depending on whether there's learners in another setting that are looking for something similar, but to go elsewhere. So there's a trade sometimes. I've been a part of a trade before. I have not been a part of making a tuition decision to send someone out to another public school.
I guess I just want to thoroughly understand what we're saying here. that the parents or legal guardians or the superintendent of another SAU can ask our superintendent to take a student due to just for consideration for a change. Now, our past practice is that these have come to the board.
Yeah, I absolutely. I have any student decision coming my way, I have typically brought it to the board. Situations like that where we have had a manifest hardship, I brought it to the board, but we've had tuition that has been provided to us, so it's not been a very difficult decision.
Right.
But that's different than the consideration for change of school or assignment.
Mm-hmm.
And Laurel, what you're specifically talking about is the consideration of a change of school or assignment. Right?
Well, I'm first talking about the first column, yeah.
Okay. Okay. So are you suggesting that we amend this policy so that all changes come to the board, not just over the
Yes.
12th? Okay.
I have a question. So prior to now, these two policies existed on their own, independent of one another.
Mm-hmm.
And this has not been raised as a concern. I mean, we didn't change any of that. We just brought them together.
It sounds like, though, that if these situations have been brought to the board in the past, though, that perhaps we have not been following our own policy.
Chances are these policies were instituted in 2005, right? And haven't been looked at since. I just know that in my almost 6 years on the board, these situations have always come to the board with of course the superintendent's recommendation on how to proceed.
Is that just coincidence, or is it, I guess I'm trying to, or has it just been
There was one time that I gave the heads up. I more or less made the decision and told the board about it because it was a straight tuition issue and it was the right thing to do at the time because of the specific circumstance that may or may not still continue to go on. But apart from that, I think that since my time has been here, the board has wanted to have an understanding of what's going on in some of the decisions. And I think that for this time frame has been healthy in that I'm not sure that has always been the case. And I think it's good for the board to know as much as it can know what's going on. And obviously if there's anything that's confidential, we just, we keep that as we follow confidentiality policies.
So is this the question of I guess communication and notification, Laurel, or is it of the board making the decision?
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
Also to understand the possible financial impacts to the district.
Right, but so is it that we want to be aware or we want to make the decision? What's the difference? I mean, what are you thinking?
I guess I would want to continue with our current practice of being the decision makers. Of course, we totally rely on the superintendent for his advice. But, and there are times when, we've actually had parents come to the board. In fact, we talk about that in that's part of the procedure for the manifest education hardship request.
Right.
Yeah.
And that part's addressed separately.
Right.
Does anybody else have feedback about number 6?
Yeah, I guess I can see Laurel's point, I think. I mean, to the extent I understand these things. If there are a number of students who transfer, the financial impact, could be pretty large. If you had 2 families of 3 each who transferred and we agreed to pay tuition, certainly would probably want to be aware of that, but would also want to understand the criteria. And, with the superintendent's recommendation, it's hard to imagine. Well, I mean, I think that we would almost all cases follow the recommendation of the superintendent. But it would be nice to know that the superintendent was explaining to us why, this is a necessary step. And of course, confidentiality issues would mean he might not even be able to tell us the family's name. But
Well, right, I agree. I mean, it could be, I mean, if for some reason students of families in our district needed to go out of district because we couldn't meet their needs, then I would think the board would want to definitely know about that so that the issue could be addressed. Not that we don't rely on Ruben to do those things, but I think it's the kind of thing we should be aware of.
I don't disagree. I also think that there may be some immediacy. I mean, there may be some safe. I mean, there's a whole host of reasons that these might come to, and so if it had to wait 2 weeks, or if it had to wait, I mean, would this have to come to a board at a board meeting? Could this be done? I guess I just don't want it to make it so cumbersome that the child actually doesn't get what they need because of the logistics around it.
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't think this board's ever been shy about having a meeting off schedule.
I guess that's what, Ruben, I was going to ask. Do you feel like this limits you or puts any constraints on, good decision-making that you know?
Well, I mean, the reason why it is written the way it is, and the reason why NHSBA writes this is because they're saying that the superintendent would know best the criteria of why this left column would need to be done, perhaps, and so that it would it actually limits the board's ability to stop that process from happening. That's what it's there for, so that it makes it an easier process, so that it's in the best interest of the kid. Or the student, you're not going to get another barrier in the way of that. That's why it's written the way it is. So right. It's just important to understand that. The manifest hardship, first of all, very rarely are we dealing with number of the left column. We're not dealing much with the right column either. That being said, I can't say that I haven't had things come to me in the last 6 years. But that's a whole. It's just a whole different rationale. In a manifest hardship, usually there's a lot more information that is necessary for the board to know. Usually of a legal nature.
Well, if
no, the left column is not a legal nature issue. It's this student here needs something completely different than what we have going on here, and this other place has that, and it's the right thing for the child. That's the way it's written.
Or even another school within our district has.
Another school within the district. Yeah.
So maybe just not make the criteria 1% of the average daily membership. Make it something like 3 students.
And then anything over that would need board approval?
Well, again, just knowing what out-of-district placements cost, right? I'm trying to balance fiduciary responsibility with providing what's needed, right, for the students.
And also it not being the personalities that we have sitting here right now. That it has to stand no matter who's in what position.
I mean, the best possible thing is just to invest in our current schools and to make sure that they have exactly what we need. Go down the line of making sure that strategic plan is done, and we'll have no issue with this because we'll have a more personalized system that needs to occur. That being the case, takes a while to get there.
Yep.
Well, and I mean, I'm curious, I think when we were talking that we've never exceeded this 1% and never been close to that in the past. And so there's not a lot of evidence that indicates that we have a lot of these things popping up. And we're continuing to make progress to, prevent prevent it from happening by taking a more personalized approach. So I think that's something
That's
to
a side effect of doing the right thing is that it prevents that from happening.
Even the few incidences we have, right?
These are placements that fall outside the realm of student services.
Yes.
Right. So I do think that there should be some sort of communication to the board about we're doing this because we don't have this capacity.
I agree. So I just want to clarify, Laurel, your suggestion is to revise the 1% to a more concrete cap number of students that do not require immediate board approval, but also to add in a piece about any change of school assignment the board needs to be made aware of.
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
I'm sorry I'm such a nudge.
No, that's great feedback.
Okay, so you're going to take that and wordsmith that and bring it back again, right?
Yes.
Great. Okay. We're up to committee updates. And I guess I'm just curious at 10:15 if people are wanting these, and if so, do they want both?
Well, I think that you've sort of had the finance committee update.
Yep.
Facilities hasn't met, so how's that?
That's great. All right, that takes us then to public comments.
All right, so I know that there's still a few people left with us, so thank you for being with us. So again, if you do have any public comment that you would like to have read into the record, just please use that hand raise feature. We will address you in person, first, last name, and town of residence. Please. All right, we have Samantha Picolingus.
I just wanted to say thank you guys very much.
Can I get that town of residence real quick on that, please?
I'm not sure she heard you.
Sam, could I just get your town of residence, please?
Sorry, I can't hear you.
Oh, weird. Could I just get your town of residence, please?
Keene, New Hampshire, but I'm a teacher in the Jaffrey Range School District.
Awesome, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you guys very much.
Thanks. Any other hands?
I'm not seeing them.
Okay, Well, then how about board matters?
Yeah, I wonder if there are any budget representatives from either Jaffrey or Ringe that need to receive information, and if they're all plumbed up for Saturday.
The only one that I'm aware of at this time is Roberta from Ridge. I'll do a little bit more digging, make sure we don't have any representatives that I have not been notified of, and we'll go from there. I'll certainly make sure that if I'm aware of anybody, they'll be notified.
Thank you.
Thanks. Any other board matters? Okay. Future items, still have that technology plan.
Yeah, I can give an update that the audit continues to go on. We're getting closer and closer to the end. It seems like if I were to make a judgment call as to the areas we need to work on the most, it would be in the areas of policies and documentation. So we'll have some work to do when this audit report comes out. We've just given some highlights. We have probably the bare essentials, but not what would be necessary to have the best compliance.
Is it policies or procedures?
A little bit of both. Like it's not so much, some of it's just documentation. So it's not even really either one.
Okay.
Firewall documentation, like a disaster recovery plan, you know, for this sort of thing. Disaster, I mean, we're talking data disaster recovery plan.
So what about like when, you know, someone comes in and holds hostage everything? Is that part of that?
Right. So well, I don't know about holding hostage. Yeah, it takes your data and ransom.
Yeah. Data
ransom. So while we have probably the protections in place to help that not take place very easily, we don't necessarily have the plan for when it, you know, what happens if it does, or, you know, are there questions I'm sure we'll have to consider, or are there better, not just firewalls, but protections? And there is a company that offers kind of the gold standard of protection. So, you know, things that we'll have to discuss.
Offline backup. Yeah.
Yep. Password policy, you know, do our passwords regularly prompt us to update and things of that nature? Yeah. So that sort of thing.
Okay. Good.
It's good. It's good to get the feedback from these people to outline what we need to do. That's what we wanted.
Yep. Great. Okay. So Saturday, is it 9:30?
It's currently proposed as 9:30. Obviously, if the board wants to change that, they can. And then I would assume that we're going to have a similar format, which we'll do a webinar and more digital, or were you guys hoping for something more in person?
There's a lot of information. Too much. I guess every board member can decide if they need hard copies and that kind of stuff, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if we're doing a digital meeting, I guess if people need hard copies, I can certainly work with whoever that needs them.
So if we want hard copies of something, we can put in a request?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, well, thank you.
So, and I assume the music room will be set up if, you know, there's an internet connection issue or whatever.
Yeah, Charlie and I will be in here having a big old party for whoever wants to come with us.
Okay, then.
Might do that.
Yeah, I'm thinking, I've been really envious, you know, Charlie actually moving tonight. when I'm like tied to, with earphones. So, okay. So 9:30, there will be Zoom information, but the music room will also be open.
Yep, so we'll run it on Zoom, that agenda. We'll try to post it. Obviously, we've already posted a lot of those documents online. I'm sure, presentations and other stuff will be given to me as they've been made available. Agenda will be created, Zoom meeting will be created. We'll have the music room set up, and people can join in as they please.
Okay, great. So.
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Thank you. Thank you. Did I hear Charlie second that? We're adjourned.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.